Hello, and welcome to the Ident Review, the show where we have a good look and chat about the various television idents that we have come to know and love over the years. And for this instalment, we're going to continue with our Christmas theming by looking at BBC2 Christmas idents from the 1970s and 1980s. Just like its older brother BBC1, BBC2 debuted its first Christmas ident in 1967, and these images I'm showing you would remain as the consistent Christmas idents for the channel up to and including 1971. The next 2 years would show different idents to represent the channel at Christmas time, and unfortunately video footage of them is still unavailable. Understandable, but it's a shame nonetheless. However, coincidentally enough, just like BBC1, the first known footage of a BBC2 Christmas ident does appear in 1974, so let's give that one a look. Like BBC1, not much different from the standard, but a charming change nonetheless. This ident shows a spinning 2 cube, which had been in place since the channel began broadcasting in colour in 1967. But instead of different colours, it's just orange here. Oddly not the most Christmassy of colours, but hey, it's still striking nonetheless. The silver sparkling stars that adorn the outside of this too, they're nice to look at, but forgive me for saying that they look oh so slightly tacky and a little cheap. Maybe not the greatest BBC2 Christmas ident, but these are still early days. Now sadly there is no footage available of the 1975 Christmas ident, only this image, and I must say, it doesn't look very imaginative. However, some footage of the 1976 ident does exist, so let's give that one a look. Sorry the footage isn't the best, but hey, this is old stuff. There's not even that much to say with this one, aside from it's the Stripe 2 logo from the era, except now it's all bright with neon colours swirling around. Again, not the most Christmassy colours ever per se, but it is strangely nice to watch. Moving on now, let's have a look at the ident for Christmas of 1977.
In 60 Minutes on 2, the original feature film of MASH starring Donald Sutherland. That's after the Old Grey Whistle Test, live from the Rainbow Theatre, London, where we're about to join Radio 1 in stereo for the Kinks' Christmas concert.
Now here is something that communicates Christmas to me. The rotating 2 is honestly beautifully designed. I love the sort of red and pink tones, and the crystal-like object within the 2 cube is also stunning to look at. And despite being 1977, this does remind me a lot of the 2 cube from the late 60s and early 70s. The font for the word Christmas is oh so 70s also, and overall, even though it looks really simple, I do love the whole design features of this ident, and as I said, it definitely makes me think of Christmas. So let's see now if the following Christmas of 1978 can do the same thing. Now just the fact that there is footage for this is great. For those who are long-time viewers, over 2 years ago I made a compilation of BBC2 Christmas idents, and at that time, surprisingly, there was no footage available for this 1978 ident. So I'm pleased whilst doing my research for this episode, footage now does exist. Is it the best Christmas ident ever? No, but again, it's quintessential British charm. A band of trumpeteers with flags attached to their instruments, each adorning with the 2 logo of the day. Simple, charming, and nice to now see footage of it 40 years later. Now let's seal off the 70s by looking at the Christmas ident for 1979.
And now our Christmas Day on BBC2 continues as we begin a season of films featuring well-known literary works set to music. The colourful and decadent Berlin Cafe Society in the 30s provided the setting for Christopher Isherwood's Goodbye to Berlin. In 1974, Liza Minnelli, Joel Grey and Michael York became the stars of Cabaret.
Okay, for me, best BBC2 Christmas ident of the 70s. Just look at this sequence. If this doesn't shout out Christmas to you within like 2 or 3 seconds, then I think you need some rewiring. Even though earlier in the year BBC2 debuted the UK's first computer-generated main ident, this Christmas edition returns to something physical and mechanical, a giant rotating snowflake, and honestly, though it looks simple, I absolutely adore it. It's been brilliantly designed, and with all its detail, it's a truly stunning piece of art. The different shades of blue colours also complement this ident really well, and give you that more chilly feeling of Christmas time. So to kick off the following decade, let's have a gander at the Christmas ident for 1980. Not that much different fundamentally, but still really stunning. The premise of a rotating snowflake has been retained for this year, and some blue shades also returned, but also mixed in with a sort of pink hue that, like the previous year, complements this ident really well. Another new addition is the legend at the bottom of the screen. It's very simplistic as fonts go, but for what this ident is going for, I kinda like it. I may think that the BBC2 word could be a little smaller, but we can't all be perfect. So is Christmas 1981 going to hit us with another giant snowflake? Let's take a look.
Merry, 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 merry Christmas. La 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 la.
Oh, these just keep getting better and better. A rotating central object is once again retained, made in the same style as the snowflakes of previous years. But this time we have 3 candles and some yellow leaf kind of things, but the spiraling effect on them works a treat. It's almost like one of those hypnotising patterns that you could just watch continuously. I also like the Christmas BBC2 legend for this year, perfectly adapting the 2 central colours of red and yellow, and this font feels Christmassy, if a font can feel Christmassy. One of my favourite Christmas idents of the 1980s. So what could Christmas 1982 possibly hold in store for us? Well, let's find out. And this is where the start of the decline happens. So the central spinning object this year is some Christmas trees, but whereas the snowflakes and candles were made in a way that made them look so detailed and eloquent, these trees sadly just look a bit rushed and cheap. Also, the graphics and font at the bottom in hindsight looks incredibly dated. It's almost like in 1982 the BBC had just discovered graphics for objects and demanded that they be included no matter what they look like. So yeah, as you've probably gathered, it's not one of my favourites. But it does have its fans. So for me, can the ident for Christmas 1983 do any better? Let's have a look-see.
Now on BBC2 we begin Christmas Eve in seasonal style. Alistair Sim and Kathleen Harrison star in the famous film version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Scrooge.
Improved, but not perfect. On one hand, I'm glad they kept the trees for a second year because this time the trees are far more detailed and look 100 times more appealing than they did the year before. I'm still not a massive fan of the font, it's the kind of style you'd see for a sale at a homeware style shop. So points for improving some faults, but to be honest, I think I and many others overall would have just preferred a whole new idea, like they've been doing each year previously. So let's move on and see if Christmas 1984 decides to stay the same course, or change things up a little.
Now, the first of our 2 Chaplin classics this afternoon co-stars The Tramp with Scraps a Mongrel, A Dog's Life.
And sadly for me, this just stumbles right back. I mean, look at this, it's so bland. I mean, one thing I do like is the string styled in the word Christmas. That's something we hadn't seen before, and it works quite well for the season. But it's the central bright hot pink bauble with the 2 logo very poorly drawn or slapped onto it. Even if the thing spun a little bit, that would make the sequence 10 times better. But no, instead it just hangs there, motionless, and as a representation as a lack of imagination, as well as potentially a budget. Right, come on 1985, please do something a little better for us.
First on BBC2 we have A Christmas Fantasy starring Fred Astaire as the man in the Santa Claus suit.
Okay, mixed feelings on this one. I really like the rectangular panes of glass that swirl by, with the little graphic scenes etched onto them. They're not that complex by any means, but they certainly communicate Christmas and are quite nice to view. But my major problem with this ident is once again the 2 logo. Like the previous year, it just sits there. Hot pink is still the colour of choice, which admittedly works a lot better against these blue and white panes, but you're just watching and waiting for it to do something, anything, even just a little spin. So no, not the perfect ident, but definitely an improvement. 1986 was the year this 2 finally left the airwaves to be replaced by a new main ident, so let's see how the Christmas of 1986 adapted this new look. Oh dear. So just like this era of the 2 logo, this Christmas ident is very, very dull. It's essentially just the same as the regular 2 logo, except it's amid a snowy landscape with snow covering it and being uncovered seconds later. Christmassy, yes. Interesting and memorable, no. Let's see if Christmas 1987 can vastly improve on this. Here's hoping. What just happened? That was such a criminally short sequence, and the shame is, I like the start of it, with a bauble as our central image with Christmassy images such as trees and people playing in the snow whirring by, but then all that wonder and fun gets sharply replaced with some of the blandest on-screen graphics you'll have ever seen. I mean, this is 1987, there were definitely much more advanced graphics that could have been achieved here. I don't know if the budget was horrendously minuscule or if the designers wanted a minuscule approach, but this is a really dull interpretation of Christmas for TV viewers. Okay, time for Christmas 1988. Will it be any good? We're about to find out. Third time, sadly, is not the charm for this era. Someone removes a mask, okay, and then we see the 2 logo. Yes, in very Christmassy colours of red and green, but it's partially obscured by ice, and overall again, this just comes across as a bit lazy and uninspired representations of Christmas. And it doesn't help the image of this era of 2 idents as being criminally boring and dull anyway. We've now reached our final ident of the day for Christmas of 1989, and here's hoping that we end on some sort of high. Let's have a look. Interesting. Now, looking at this does not really scream Christmas to you in any way, shape or form. However, this is a massive, massive improvement over the past 3 years. This ident is brimming with colour and attention to detail both in the letter 2 itself and the backgrounds around it. It doesn't have a thing to do with Christmas, and considering I'm placing it as the best BBC2 Christmas ident of the later half of the 80s, that tells you so much about this era of BBC2, and how with all the white and blandness there was still some creativity and imagination left. Overall, whilst BBC2 Christmas idents also show a massive progression from the start of the 70s to the end of the 80s, just like BBC1, unlike its older brother, the amount of quality Christmas idents is severely lacking, particularly in the 1980s. Of course, it's just my own silly opinion, but it almost seems like as time went on, BBC2 sort of became an afterthought in terms of branding and representation, and as the Christmas idents became much more simpler and ultimately duller towards the end, BBC One's idents would continue to become more complex and more expansive. And even though the 1989 Christmas ident for BBC Two is nice, it doesn't hold a candle to its BBC One colleague. Would the 1990s and 2000s be kind to BBC Two at Christmas? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. And so we've come to the end, but before we go, the final words from our broadcaster.
Entertainment for Christmas.
If you fancy a Christmas chuckle, don't miss the Bob Monkhouse Show. Oh, I love that title. On Christmas evening, BBC Two. It's really an international lineup of laughter because from Russia, a Russian comedian, sounds like a contradiction in terms, but a very funny man, Yakov Smirnov. From America, the last of the Red Hot Mummers, and the best, Bertice Redding to sing for you. And from Britain, a man who's made a a career out of falling down on the job. That wonderful comedy star, Norman Wisdom. All with me on the Bob Monkhouse Show, so won't you be with me too? Christmas evening, BBC2.
Well, this is the later part of Christmas Day here on 2. At 6:15, we take a look at the natural world to find out how our wildlife copes with the cold during these winter days. After the news on 2, it's pantomime time, in a manner of speaking, with La Cenerentola, Rossini's comic opera version of Cinderella, recorded at last summer's Glyndebourne Festival. That's at 7:15. Then at 9:50, the Queen gives her Christmas broadcast to the Commonwealth in a special version with subtitles and sign language to help the deaf and hard of hearing. The last Bob Monkhouse show of the present series is at 10:05, when his guests from the world of comedy include Norman Wisdom and the Russian-American comedian Yakov Smirnoff. Completing the lineup, some classic comedy at 11 o'clock from the Marx Brothers in Duck Soup.
That was all this week for this instalment of the Ident Review. I hope you all enjoyed watching it, and we hope that you tune in next week. But due to other commitments behind the scenes, the regular programmes should hopefully reach you at their usual days and times, but if they do not, you now know why. But we will always do our best to get them to you, as your support is always appreciated. But until the next time, have a good week, and we hope that you join us again soon. Good night.